Nathan was absorbed in the tedious task of working with fresh test data, a lengthy and repetitive job that was essential for his team's recent efforts on the test car. Despite not being particularly excited about it, he methodically organized the information for analysis. His phone buzzed with a text message. Without giving much thought to the sender, he briefly glanced at the screen. It wasn't until a break in his work that he finally took a moment to look at the message more closely. The message came from an unknown number, though the area code was local. At first, he assumed it was likely spam, but then he reconsidered. He opened it, thinking it might be from a team member whose contact details he hadn't saved yet. When he clicked on the message, he was stunned to see an explicit photo. Confused, he read the accompanying text. "Pay attention. You still have time at Mason's 18. Ouch. He stared at the message for a moment, rereading it. Then a small chuckle escaped him. Misdirected solicitations weren't common, and he was just about to dismiss it when he looked at the image again, and his heart stopped. There, on her left leg, barely visible, was a small mole, one he recognized immediately as belonging to Sophia, his wife of 6 years. He stared at the photo, trying to convince himself it couldn't possibly be her. But the more he looked, the more certain he became that it was indeed a compromising image of his wife. He read the message again, trying to make sense of it. Mason's was a local pub, but Sophia had never been there. He knew she was in the neighboring town, so what was she doing at Mason's at 6 o'clock in the evening, while she was supposed to be on her way to Boston? She had a major proposal coming up, and the entire team had flown in that day. They were scheduled to meet tomorrow for final preparations, and Sunday for a full rehearsal. As one of the leaders, Sophia's involvement was crucial. It was 5:15 p.m. now, and her flight had been scheduled to land at 4:30. She usually checked in with him when she landed, but maybe she was busy with the team and their gear as they headed to the hotel. He thought about calling her but decided to address the message first. Nothing unusual, he thought, but he still typed out, "Who is this? And where did you get this photo? Should I meet you at Mason's?" As he packed up for the day, he resolved to head to the pub for answers. He needed to hear from Sophia about her flight, so he sent her a quick message. "How was the flight? I'm grabbing a bite. Call me when you're free." He planned to keep a low profile and figure things out while heading to his car. Just as he was leaving, his phone beeped again. He thought it was Sophia, but when he checked, it was the mysterious sender. "I'll be there, but I'm sure you'll find someone more interesting than me." His mind raced. He quickly opened the Maps app and headed to his car. It took him 30 minutes to get to Mason's, and by the time he arrived, it was 5:40 p.m., which meant he'd be a little after 6 o'clock. He had no idea what was waiting for him. His plan was to go straight inside and meet whoever had sent the message, hoping they knew something he didn't. As he drove, his phone rang again. This time it was Sophia, telling him about the busy time with her team. "I'll call you later before bed. Love you," she said. He didn't give it much thought. Their conversation could wait. His mind was consumed with the situation at Mason's and how the sender had gotten such personal information about Sophia. His heart pounded as he pulled into the parking lot at 6:12 p.m. The message hadn't mentioned who was waiting to meet him, but he assumed whoever it was would reach out once he arrived. The mention of someone more interesting was what truly bothered him. It was as though the sender knew something he didn't, and he was being played. Inside, he felt a storm of emotions. He trusted Sophia completely, and their relationship seemed strong. At least that's what he had thought. But now, the only way someone could have gotten that photo of her was something he was about to find out in just a few minutes. The thought of what might be revealed made him sick with dread. As he stepped into the dimly lit pub, he felt disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Ahead, he saw a spacious dining area, and to the left, a bar. He chose a seat at the far end of the bar and signaled the bartender, who had just served a well-dressed patron, to take his order. After asking for a draft, he turned his attention back to the dining area. A man, having placed his order, walked across the floor toward a table full of lively people. Then Nathan saw it, Sophia, sitting at the table, graciously accepting a drink from a sharply dressed man. She looked stunning in her little black dress and pearls. For a moment he was numb. Operating on autopilot, he walked toward the table. And as soon as Sophia saw him, her warm smile turned into one of shock. Undeterred, Nathan pressed on, grabbing the well-dressed man by the hair with his left hand and yanking it back with force. The man dropped his drinks, stumbling backward and crying out in pain as Nathan dragged him past. Letting go, Nathan prepared to throw a punch, but by the time he was ready, the man had already retreated, collapsing onto the ground before Nathan could engage. "Don't bother getting up, Ethan," Nathan said coldly. Ethan, now a mess of spilled drinks and disarrayed clothes, nodded silently, not even attempting to rise or speak. Nathan's eyes shifted to the table, where a heavy silence had settled. He recognized the faces, members of Sophia's team, people who frequently gathered at their home. He couldn't help but wonder about their odd loyalty to the team despite the betrayal, except for one. Someone knew the truth and had chosen to expose it. For a moment, he considered figuring out who the informant was, but quickly discarded the thought as not worth pursuing. "I'm going home," Sophia said flatly. "If there's any chance to salvage our marriage, you'll come home now." She started to get up, but Nathan motioned for her to wait. "Give me a moment to leave," he replied. Before heading out, he looked over at Clara Brooks, sitting beside James Carter. "Clara, Frank thinks you're in Boston too. James, is this what Lily believes?" Their silence and refusal to meet his eyes spoke volumes. Is the entire team involved with each other? He wondered. Sadly, he knew at least one of them was. The drive home was mechanical, almost as if he were on autopilot. He was surprised to find himself pulling into his driveway. Inside the house, he grabbed a beer from the fridge and sank into the living room. He knew Frank Brooks and Lily Davidson, but the other two couples at the table were unfamiliar. He debated whether to reach out to James or Lily, but quickly realized he had little desire to engage with either. There was no real information to gain. Still, considering the gravity of Clara and James's actions, he decided to send them a message. "Just heard from Sophia. The team's travel plans seem to have changed. Might be best to call for updates now." They were aware something had happened, and it was up to them whether to dig deeper. At least his conscience was clear. About 20 minutes later, the garage door opened, signaling Sophia's return. Nathan waited in the living room as she walked in, still in her little black dress but now without her shoes or jewelry. Though her demeanor appeared calm, Nathan could sense she was ready to talk. She sat on the couch opposite him, silent. He believed in the power of silence during tough conversations and was prepared to let it stretch as long as necessary. But it didn't last. Sophia, barely holding it together, broke the silence. "It's not what you think," she began, only to be cut off by his raised hand. "You have no idea what I think after what I saw tonight," Nathan shot back. "I don't need a long-winded explanation. We're both engineers. We know there's no clear answer to any question. Why is just an excuse for poor outcomes. So I'm not asking why. Let's start with something else. How much time? How many people? How many others know about this? Am I the betrayed man among our colleagues and friends? Or is this just our little secret?" "No, Nathan, it's not like that," Sophia protested. "We're a team. Our travel plans got messed up. And instead of going back home and flying again tomorrow, Ethan suggested we stay here and rest before the job starts. I didn't see the whole team there. Where were the others?" he pressed. "Some stayed home an extra night and are meeting us at the airport tomorrow," she replied. "But you chose to deceive me," Nathan countered. "You and Ethan seemed awfully close. Is there something going on between the star engineer and the Prodigy program manager that I should know about?" "Well, for one thing, Ethan's fine, and he convinced the owners of Mason's not to press charges," Sophia said, trying to sound reassuring. Nathan's eyes widened in shock at her defense of Ethan. "I don't care about your boyfriend. If he hadn't tripped, I would have broken his nose. And by the way, the verdict's still out," Nathan added. "Let him press charges. I've already spent a night in jail. I'm not scared of that." Sophia shrugged. "Fair enough. This could be good evidence for you," she said, managing a half-smile. "Do you love him?" Sophia paused, gathering her thoughts before answering. Yes, she said, the word hanging in the air, and the silence that followed signaled more trouble to come. He's not my boyfriend. Nothing happened. Sophia quickly clarified. Yes, I should have told you about the travel changes, but it didn't seem that important whether I was in town or in Boston. You weren't expecting me, and I was still dedicated to the team. All we did was have dinner before going to our rooms. There was no reason for you to react the way you did. He just brought drinks. You humiliated me in front of my team. Nathan shot back, his voice rising with frustration. Sophia, now fully defensive, tried to keep her composure, but it was clear the tension between them was only building. Nathan picked up his phone and opened the message, sliding it across the coffee table toward Sophia. He could tell by her expression that she remembered the photo and the circumstances surrounding it. Realizing there was no point in denying it any longer, she sighed and began to speak. Nathan activated the voice recorder on his phone and tucked it into his shirt pocket, preparing himself for whatever was coming next. Nathan, our team. Sophia hesitated, searching for the right words. We're very close-knit in many ways, most of us, she continued, trying to explain. We have a small group that meets regularly. Mason hosted us all. We've been shouldering the bulk of the proposal prep. You know how much time I've invested in this. I don't know exactly when it started, but it was after Ethan took charge. We worked closely together and I got drawn to him. And then, well, it just happened, she confessed. Intentionality? Nathan interjected sharply. Making love isn't some spontaneous act. First, you undress. There's a series of conscious choices involved. We both know that, so spare me the excuses. So, nearly 6 months, Nathan muttered, answering his own question. That's when Ethan secured the contract, right? Sophia nodded in acknowledgement. The team, Nathan pressed on. All of you. He couldn't quite bring himself to call it what it was, but he had to know. Are you all involved? She nodded again. Yes. Ethan thought it would build trust and strengthen the team. Is that how he convinced everyone to start a company-wide love team? Nathan's voice dripped with sarcasm. Now you're being disrespectful, Sophia snapped, her tone growing defensive. It's deeper than that. I feel a strong connection to Ethan and the team, more than ever. Nathan's stomach twisted as Sophia's confidence grew. A dangerous sign. He sensed the situation was about to escalate. Unfortunately, he said, his voice cold, you'll be seeing some personnel changes in your team. Sophia gasped, panic flickering in her eyes. What have you done? She asked, voice rising with disbelief. If you tell anyone else, it'll just cause more harm, Nathan replied flatly. Let them make their own decisions. We all have to accept it. Sophia, desperation creeping into her voice, added, I can't stay quiet and complicit in this. I trust James and Lily. Actually, I'd rather be with them than with Clara and Frank, he remarked, his voice colder now. I let them know my travel plans had changed. How your friends respond to their spouses and how those spouses handle it is their business. But I can live with my choice. Nathan, Sophia almost shouted now. Our team is the most productive in CR Incorporated history, and you've benefited too. Just because we held team meetings on Wednesdays doesn't mean you missed out. I never excluded you. You always had access when you needed it. So I was socializing with my team earlier, and you didn't know about it. Do you want to discuss that picture you showed me? She taunted, her voice sharp. You're still trying to justify it? Nathan said, his heart racing. Sophia was only digging herself deeper, defending what she knew was indefensible. He'd briefly considered forgiving her on the ride home from Mason's, but after hearing about Ethan, the thought vanished. He didn't want to hear any more of her excuses.
No, Nathan. Sofia es nered.
We're not letting you off the hook. You need to text James and Lily and let them know you heard from me. We're stuck in Atlanta, but we've got flights booked for tomorrow morning. That's the story Clara and Frank are sticking to, and you'll support it. Got it. Her tone left no room for negotiation. Millions are at stake in this deal, and your whining means nothing. Send the message, then we'll figure out our next move." "What next?" Nathan yelled, his patience finally snapping. "There is no next. Are you leaving now? You, Ethan, and your messed-up team can do whatever you want. We're done. I'll find a lawyer this week and settle this. It'll be a simple 50-50th split. You keep your pension, I'll keep mine. Go," he added, his voice deadened. "You've got reservations in the city. Use them. Head to Boston and chalk up another win for you and your team." "Nathan, please send those messages," Sophia pleaded, her voice softer now, a desperate edge creeping in. "If we lose Clara or Frank before the presentation, the company could lose millions, for both of us. We could miss out on tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in commissions and bonuses. Think of the possibilities with that money. Just think about it, Nathan. Just us. Please, don't let this misunderstanding ruin everything. Ethan says I'm on track for CEO. I just need to keep doing what we're doing for a few more years. Don't you want that for me? For us?" Sophia's voice wavered, pleading. "Just leave." Nathan could barely get the words out before he was struck from behind. A sharp blow to his back that knocked the wind out of him, leaving him crumpled on the floor with a knee pressing into his spine. "Don't hurt him too much," Sophia interjected, her voice strangely calm despite the chaos. "So, the jury's still out on whether my nose is broken, huh?" Ethan's voice was close, full of amusement as he loomed over Nathan. Nathan realized the situation was more dire than he'd imagined. There must be a transmitter somewhere, he thought. Now I know whose side she's on. Let's see whose nose ends up broken. Ethan grinned, leaning closer. "Grab his damn phone and send those damn texts for him," someone barked, yanking him off the floor. Only one person. Nathan feigned surprise, prompting the individual behind him to exert considerable effort to lift him, revealing their weakness. The office-type adversary, wheezing from the effort of hauling Nathan to his feet after being used as a human punching bag, provided an unexpected glimpse into his limitations. Nathan caught his breath and steeled himself for what was to come. Unlike Ethan and his polished team of salesmen, Nathan's team operated in the field with the 160th Sword Detachment from Fort Campbell, California. While they didn't operate on the same scale, their fieldwork, alongside crews on test missions, earned them an invitation to support the Pillsbury trials under the mentorship of seasoned veterans who flew aircraft modified by Nathan's team for specific operational needs. If members of Nathan's team showed up at your door, it signaled the end of the line. They developed the specialized gear necessary to enter hostile zones, and, most crucially, to extract themselves from those situations. Every operation was a matter of survival, ensuring the success of the mission and the safe return of all involved. The 160th and the passengers who trusted Nathan's team had a deep appreciation for the work that went into making their gear operational. Among them, Staff Sergeant Lucas Wright stood out as the most formidable presence, his reputation earning him respect across the spectrum. From vagrants to colonels, everyone held him in high regard for the unwavering commitment he showed in never leaving a man behind, a reputation solidified during the harrowing Columbia mission. Staff Sergeant Wright had the young lieutenant, a rookie on his first mission, stick close. The lieutenant was holding his own, but when FARC rebels launched an ambush, they barely fended off the attackers. When Wright turned back to check on the lieutenant, he saw him sprawled on the ground, blood seeping from a head wound. "He's unconscious," the medic observed, checking for vital signs. Wright knelt beside the lieutenant and lifted him onto the fire carrier. "He's gone," the doctor said flatly. "Maybe," Wright responded, "but he's still coming home with us." The medic couldn't hide his disbelief. "We've got over 5 TRS back to the landing site through thick forest. We'll be lucky to make it back in one piece. But carrying a dead guy. What's this guy thinking?" Wright fixed the medic with a steady gaze. "I'd do the same for you, Jack," he said calmly. "Stay close, just in case I need you." Their return to base was a moment of legend. As the helicopter touched down, the doctor was waiting. The medic briefed him on the lieutenant's condition. The doctor pulled out a penlight and shone it into the lieutenant's eyes. The medic stared in disbelief as the lieutenant's pupils contracted under the light. Care to reconsider your diagnosis? The doctor asked. The medic hurried the revived lieutenant to the operating room. The lieutenant was the kind of man who didn't need to speak often. But when he did, everyone listened. He wasn't replaceable in a world where everyone was disposable. Nathan and his team admired him for his timeless presence. During one of the prolonged downtimes between missions, Staff Sergeant Wright took the time to teach Nathan and the team basic yet effective hand-to-hand combat techniques. You engineers might find yourself in situations where a jammed copier or a paper cut is your biggest problem, he joked. But if you stick around long enough in this field, you might end up in more interesting places. So, if you ever come across the local inhabitants, you'll have a few tricks to use. He paused, his face serious. Let's hope a paper cut stays the worst you ever deal with. Nathan focused on regulating his breathing, subtly leaning against his captor to feign compliance. He remembered the lessons Staff Sergeant Wright had shared. Sometimes the best strategy was enduring the blows until you had the chance to outsmart your opponent. It wasn't ideal, but it worked. And in this case, Nathan would use passive resistance to sap his captor's strength. Give me the phone, Nathan, Ethan demanded, his eyes locked on him. Now that you know about my affair with Sophia, you're just another weakling. Do as we say, and maybe you'll still have a place with her when the team no longer needs her. Don't forget the luxury that her bonus could bring you. Maybe she'll even buy you a synthetic companion for those lonely moments. Ethan's voice dripped with mockery as he relished in humiliating Nathan. Nathan remained silent, refusing to give Ethan the satisfaction of a response. Where is it, Nathan? Ethan pressed, his gaze narrowing as he spotted the outline of Nathan's phone in his shirt pocket. Ah, found it, Ethan said with a grin, reaching for the phone with his right hand. Nathan forcefully pulled his right heel back, striking his captor's shin midway and then dragging it down until it collided with the toes of his Gucci moccasins. Flexing his arms, he broke free from his captor's grasp, who let out a cry of pain as he collapsed beneath Nathan's weight, unable to keep his footing. Ethan's eyes widened as Nathan moved with precision, extending his right hand and executing a shoulder turn as the first sergeant had taught him. A powerful punch landed squarely on Ethan's face with full force, and Nathan felt the satisfying crunch of bone beneath his fist as blood erupted from Ethan's nose, causing him to crumple to the ground as if struck by an axe. Turning to assess the next threat, Nathan noticed Frank lying on the floor, clutching his leg and whimpering in pain. I think you broke my leg, Frank gasped. Without hesitation, Nathan stomped on Frank's foot, causing him to cry out once more. That should clear up any doubts, Nathan remarked coolly, turning back to Ethan, who was trying to rise to his knees, hands pressed to his bloodied face. Leaning down, Nathan whispered in Ethan's ear, Looks like you've got a broken nose, Ethan, but I'm not ready to sacrifice for the team just yet. He followed this with a firm strike to Ethan's temple, sending him back to the floor with a heavy thud. Nathan scanned the room for Sophia. That's when a sharp blow struck him in the middle of his back, near his neck, dropping him to one knee. He turned to face his assailant and saw Sophia holding a cast-iron frying pan. Her swing narrowly missed, grazing his side instead. Rising to his feet, Nathan grabbed the frying pan from her. Sophia, we can still fix this, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Think about the money you'll lose. I'll end the affair. I'll stop them, I swear. Just you and me like before. Nathan rubbed the back of his head, astonished at how quickly she was shifting between versions of herself. For a moment, he likened her transformation to the alien creature in The Thing, shifting form to meet the demands of each new situation. He chuckled at the thought, his smile conveying a tacit approval of her final attempt. Sophia stepped closer, trying to embrace him. He lowered his left hand from his neck to steady her. After a brief pause, he raised his right hand and delivered a punch to her nose. Not hard enough to knock her out, but enough to fracture it. Sophia screamed and collapsed to the floor. Doesn't it hurt? Nathan asked coldly. Your eyes are watering, you can't breathe properly, and there's blood everywhere. It's quite effective, isn't it? Why did you hit me? Sophia cried out, her voice filled with disbelief. Because I could, he replied bluntly. His phone was still recording the entire scene. Although not every recording would favor him, he felt confident that he had enough evidence to justify his actions. Remembering Staff Sergeant Wright's advice, he took a quick glance around the room. Decide when to act and wait for the right moment, he recalled. But when you do, act decisively, and don't stop until you're the only one left standing. Aside from Frank, who was whimpering in the corner, and Sophia, trying to staunch the flow of blood from her nose, Nathan was the only one still moving. You've saved another ace, he mused to himself. Doesn't quite fit your profile, lover boy. And poor Frank will be good as new by Monday. Such rotten luck, missing out on those millions and hefty bonuses, he said aloud, a dry chuckle escaping him. I wonder what Sam will have to say about all this, he mused, considering whether to call emergency services. He hesitated. Involving the police would end any chance of interrogating Sophia, and he still had questions. Moving closer to her, Nathan knelt beside Sophia, who was pressing a dish towel to her face. He showed her how to pinch the bridge of her nose with his thumb and index finger, his adrenaline starting to ebb as exhaustion set in. He sank into the chair across from her, his shoulders heavy with the weight of everything that had transpired. Where did my wife go? Nathan muttered, staring at her, the woman sitting before him almost unrecognizable. The person he thought he knew seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who had deceived him more thoroughly than he ever imagined. Was it worth it? He asked, his voice quiet but firm. Sophia met his gaze and shook her head slowly. It could have been, she admitted, if you had just agreed. We were so close. After Monday, I'd have been in the executive suite. This setback will delay everything. I can fix it, but it's a delay. So becoming vice president was your ultimate goal? Nathan pressed. What about us? The lies, the deception. How long would this have lasted? You're so naive, Ethan sneered. I knew this would happen. He warned me that your rigid ethics and Boy Scout mentality would hold me back if I let them. He urged me to break free from your influence and carve my own path to success. Did he advise you before or after he took advantage of you? Nathan shot back. You don't know the half of it, Sophia spat. I tried to follow your advice like a good little engineer, thinking it would help me advance. You want to know what really works? Nathan remained silent, not giving her the satisfaction of a response. Sometimes, when someone's about to self-destruct, you just have to step aside and let it happen, she continued, recording. All your advice didn't mean anything in the end. I went above and beyond to ensure my projects were on time and under budget, but all I got were a few good job comments. It wasn't until Clara pulled me aside that I learned what a woman really needs to do to succeed. Let me tell you, using lovemaking to climb the corporate ladder works. And it's a lot easier and more enjoyable than you'd think, she added with a smirk. So this was before Ethan entered the picture? Nathan asked, his tone barely concealing his disbelief. Oh, for a clever engineer, you can be really dense sometimes, Nathan, Sophia quipped. It was at a Christmas party, a year after I joined CR. That's when I gave in to Sam and never looked back. Wait, you're also sleeping with the boss?
Sam Woods.
Nathan exclaimed in shock. Yes, Nathan, Sam, Ethan, Frank, and anyone else who can help my career. Still to this day, Sophia replied with chilling indifference. You think you've covered all the angles, but we informed Sam about our whereabouts when we left here. He's rallying the rest of the team, and they'll get a fabricated story about our absence. They'll carry on without us, but I think the extra effort we put in with their procurement managers will pay off. Do I really want to hear this? Nathan wondered aloud. What the hell, why not? Extra effort, he taunted. You've always been proactive, Sophia. It was so effortless. I hesitate to even call it effort. She laughed softly. Reminds me of that old joke. You know, the worst sex I ever had was still pretty good. At the Bitter Conference, things went smoothly with the men, so we had to get creative with Brenda, the only woman on the selection committee. It's funny, but I managed to seduce her too, though I had to get Ethan's help for a little boost. Considering the deal we've worked out, our committee is flawless now, she added smugly. Then why all this? If everything's already falling into place, why use these aggressive tactics? Nathan asked, still processing her words. It was Ethan's idea, and it was foolish. I told him to relax, promised I'd go home, calm you down, and make it back in time for the flight, but he insisted on asserting control. Look where we are now. Instead of being the face of the winning team, I'm here with you. It's still salvageable, but it'll set me back, she said, a trace of frustration creeping into her voice. You don't come cheap, Nathan retorted, his anger simmering beneath the surface. Maybe not, Sophia admitted with a sly smile, but I'll still soar. Well, you certainly won't be flying now. Nathan shot back, his suspicions growing. He wondered if Sophia had a transmitter on her. Sam, are you listening? He said aloud, almost as if he were addressing the walls. I'll contact the authorities. I'm sure there are multiple felonies involved, not to mention fraud. This is a federal contract, right? He said, his voice rising with the weight of his realization. Yes, the feds aren't exactly lenient when it comes to extra efforts. Sam's voice responded smoothly, cutting in over the phone. I'm sure you've got some top-notch lawyers, but there might be an alternative. Before Nathan could respond, Sophia's phone rang with the familiar tune of Hail to the Chief. She answered it immediately, putting it on speaker. Sam, she greeted, her voice tinged with expectation. Sam's voice soon filled the room. Firstly, let me offer my apologies. Ethan's actions were a blunder. I can assure you the board will address this matter firmly, Sam said. Thank you, Sam, Nathan said, a weight lifting from his shoulders. It's good to know you and the board take assault and fraud seriously. Nathan, these are serious allegations, Sam continued. Lawyers will make money off this, but nobody wants to disrupt the status quo. We can pay the fines. Ethan and Frank can do community service, but in the end, you'll get a divorce and half of what you have left. Think about that. Is there an or in this scenario, Sam? Nathan asked, his voice edged with a mixture of bitterness and disbelief. Sophia always said you were the smarter one, Sam mused, his tone almost appreciative. But I'm increasingly glad I brought Sophia into the fold. Indeed, Nathan, there's definitely an or, Sam confirmed. We've supplanted you in your wife's affections, and when you confronted the issue, the response was, well, shameless. Appalling, Nathan muttered under his breath, finally grasping the full scope of the betrayal. Nathan, Sam continued, instead of going the law enforcement route, we might find a more agreeable solution. I've just sent a photo to Sophia's phone, not personally, but from one of my technicians. They assured me it will disappear once viewed. Take a look. Maybe this will smooth things over. Sophia handed the phone to Nathan, showing him the image. It displayed the Bank of Grand Cayman, with a string of figures that made Nathan's heart sink. And when does this come into play? Nathan asked, his voice strained. It's already in motion, Nathan. You should have received an email with your account details by now. It's been a rough day for you, and I understand if emotions have clouded your judgment. Sophia is a deceiver, no question about it. But when it comes to the bank, feelings don't count. They just don't. Right? Nathan replied, matching Sam's tone. CR will cover your divorce expenses. Reconciliation is off the table. Sophia will pursue her share, no doubt about that. She'll take her personal belongings and her pension. Nathan paused, considering his options. He could expose the entire sordid affair, risk the fallout, and let the chips fall where they may. But then again, Sam had just given him 5 million reasons to reconsider. Maybe walking away wasn't such a bad option. Does CR have any medical staff? Nathan asked after a moment's thought. Oh, absolutely, Nathan. We've got a few doctors on hand, Sam replied smoothly. All right, better get moving, Nathan said. Send a couple of them over in the limo to join your team, just to make sure we're on the same page, Sam clarified, likely referring to Sophia. Nathan's point is clear, Sam confirmed. Is that all, Nathan? Goodbye, Sam, Nathan said flatly, ending the conversation. He retrieved his phone, turned off the recording app, and slipped it back into his pocket. I knew you'd see things our way, Nathan. We can still be friends after all this. Maybe even with benefits once it's all over, Sophia said, flashing what she thought was a charming smile. But even her grin couldn't hide the damage to her face. Her eyes were darkened, blood crusted beneath her nose, and dried streaks hung from her chin. Nathan found the sight almost amusing and allowed himself a small smile. Once again, Sophia misinterpreted his expression as agreement and leaned in for a kiss. Nathan raised his right hand to stop her, then grabbed her face, pushing her back hard until she crashed onto the sofa. Either I slapped you too hard or not hard enough, Nathan said coldly. Why would I ever want to kiss you, Sophia? She glared at him, offended. Take whatever you want, but don't be here tomorrow, Nathan instructed, heading toward the door. As he passed Frank, still curled in pain on the floor, he paused. Still hurting, huh? Nathan asked casually. Yeah. Damn it, you idiot. It still kills, Frank groaned. Maybe this will take your mind off it, Nathan quipped, delivering a sharp kick to Frank's groin. Frank gasped, doubling over in agony. Nathan stepped out, getting into his car, but he wasn't sure where he was headed. Food and a place to sleep were top priorities. After a quick stop for a burger at a nearby cafe, he checked into a red roof in just outside the city, near the highway. He collapsed into bed, falling asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Despite the soreness from the numerous injuries he had sustained, he rose early, dragging his battered body out of bed. While brewing coffee in his motel room, his phone buzzed. He reached for it, seeing a message from that familiar number. Without hesitation, he opened it. Apologies for yesterday. Let's meet at the mall around noon. I'll be waiting at the bar, the message read. He quickly typed a response and poured the lukewarm coffee from the carafe into a paper cup. Yes, I'll be there, he thought, setting his phone down and opening his laptop. It was time to dive into some online banking. Back in college, long before meeting Sophia, Nathan had a professor who'd always advised students to set up an offshore account as a safety net. With nothing left to lose, Nathan had followed that advice. He'd opened an account in the Cayman Islands, a new account dubbed his Love You Foundation. That had been a decade ago, and since then he'd contributed whenever he could, amassing around $50,000 in savings. Now that account was about to see a substantial deposit. Logging into each secure bank website with ease, Nathan transferred funds from CR's payments into his personal account. He left $100,000 in the original account, then showered and changed into fresh clothes. Ready for his meeting, he made his way out. Arriving just after noon, Nathan spotted a man waving him over. The man looked to be around his age, sharp and well-groomed. Nathan approached him. I believe you messaged me? Nathan asked, taking a seat. I regret how things unfolded. I didn't know how to tell you, the stranger began. Why don't you introduce yourself first and tell me what your connection is to Sophia? Nathan interrupted, pressing for answers. I used to be on her team. After 8 years in the army, I left due to injuries. Kay hired me about 6 months ago, and I joined Ethan's team 3 months ago. I mentioned working with Sophia to a friend, and when he asked for her full name, we discovered we had a mutual friend. He asked me to keep an eye on Sophia as a favor. First, everything seemed fine. I was welcomed into the team, but the reasons behind it weren't clear at the time, the man explained. About 2 months later, Sophia came to see me again. She's undeniably attractive and persuasive, but when I asked about the ring, she just smiled and said, "It's okay with you, right?" I made it clear I didn't agree. That's when things took a turn for the worse. I started getting terrible assignments and nothing but grief from Ethan. I reached out to our mutual friend once more, telling him about Sophia's advances. He had a hunch there was more to the story and thought you should know. Ethan even sent me a photo of them trying to lure me onto the team with promises of a reward if I accepted. Let's just say I don't appreciate their tactics. I value honesty. So, I quit yesterday and decided to reach out to you, he explained. Our mutual friend mentioned a Nathan Lucas Wright, he added. If it weren't for Lucas, he trailed off, pausing before continuing. Let's just say he helped me out of a tight spot when I was a rookie lieutenant. I owe him a few favors. We both do. Nathan nodded in understanding. So, what's your plan? The stranger asked. Sam pretty much laid it out for me, Nathan replied. I could involve the authorities. Frank, Ethan, and even Sophia would all face legal consequences. But with Sam's legal team, it would probably amount to nothing. We made a deal. You might call it a compromise, and maybe you're right. But they took the one thing I couldn't replace. If I can't hold them legally accountable, I'll find another way to make them pay. It won't bring Sophia back, but I might start to realize she wasn't as indispensable as I once thought. I got a trip planned. Please pass on my thanks to Lucas for everything. I won't be going back to work, Nathan said, determined. And you? Nathan asked, looking the stranger in the eye. Well, Lucas has always spoken highly of Harvard Solutions. Now that you're out of the picture, they might need another engineer. You'll find their approach at Baxter a bit different. You might like it. The work's challenging, but the perks don't come close to what Tony's team offered, he explained. Nathan smiled. I think I can live with that, he said. The stranger rose and Nathan followed suit. They exchanged a nod, a simple farewell, and parted ways without saying anything further. Come Monday, Nathan was at the airport, checking in for a flight to Costa Rica. Tamarindo seemed like a good place to unwind. He was heading toward security when he spotted a mailbox. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out an envelope addressed to the U.S. Department of Justice, Washington, D.C., and dropped it in. Inside was a flash drive containing a recording. Maybe they'll be interested. Who knows? He mused. I'm sure Sam's lawyers aren't as formidable as he thinks. He continued toward security, feeling a sense of closure, or at least the beginning of it. 9 months later, Nathan was seated at his usual spot in a cafe. Anna, as charming as ever, brought him his beer. Thanks, dear, he said, lifting the bottle to his lips. A piece of mail caught his attention. He picked up the envelope, noting the absence of a return address. He wondered who had tracked him down. While he hadn't gone out of his way to hide, finding him in this small town on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica seemed like a task requiring more effort than the average person could muster. He suspected Sam's people had located him. Nathan left the envelope untouched for 2 days, cautious, but confident it wasn't a bomb.
Miguel.
Nathan called out to the cafe owner. Do you have a knife? Ah, Mr. Nathan, Miguel replied with a sigh. Nathan handed him the envelope and stepped back cautiously. Better safe than sorry, he said as Miguel opened it. Miguel handed over the contents, and Nathan thanked him. Taking another sip of his beer, he turned the envelope over. Several sheets of paper slipped onto the table, including a note that read simply, "Thought you might be interested," followed by a telephone number instead of a signature. The number, Nathan realized, was likely one Lucas could use to find him. I can live with that, he muttered to himself. Flipping through the other sheets, Nathan came across a newspaper article with a photograph. The image showed Ethan, Frank, Sophia, and Clara being escorted out of the CR building in handcuffs. The headline read, "4 accused of multi-million-dollar procurement fraud." Nathan couldn't help but smile. Maybe Sam's legal team isn't as formidable as he thought, he mused. A habit he'd developed since he'd come to Costa Rica. It was his way of hearing English when his Spanish was limited. Anna, another beer, please? He called out, extending his empty bottle. Sure thing, Mr. Nathan, Anna replied with a smile. Thanks, Anna, he acknowledged, taking the fresh beer and gazing out at the vast, deep blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean.